Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Perfect Life. Clint Webb stood in his workshop, the scent of pine shavings and wood stain filling his lungs as he put the finishing touches on a custom dining table. At 38, he had built Webb Woodworks from nothing into one of Montana's most respected furniture companies. His calloused hands moved with practiced precision, each stroke of the sandpaper deliberate and sure. The workshop door creaked open, and his 13-year-old son, Tyler, bounded in, backpack slung over his shoulder. "Dad, Coach said I made varsity. Can you believe it? 8th grade, and I'm playing with the high schoolers." Clint's weathered face broke into a genuine smile. "That's incredible, son. Your hard work paid off." He set down his tools and pulled Tyler into a bear hug. "We'll celebrate tonight. Maybe take your mom to that steakhouse she likes." Tyler's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "Mom said she has plans tonight. Some work thing with her book club friends." Clint nodded, though something nagged at him. Alicia had been having a lot of work things lately for someone who ran a small boutique. But he pushed the thought away. After 15 years of marriage, surely he could trust his wife. "Well then, it's just us men," Clint said, ruffling Tyler's dark hair. "We'll get burgers and celebrate properly." As Tyler headed to the house, Clint returned to his work, unaware that across town, his wife Alicia was in a hotel room with Bradley Henson, the smooth-talking real estate developer who'd been helping her find a new location for her boutique. Alicia Webb, now 35, had once been the girl every man in Millfield wanted to marry. Blonde, ambitious, and sharp-tongued, she'd chosen Clint because he seemed stable, reliable, everything her alcoholic father hadn't been. But 15 years of small-town life had worn on her. She craved excitement, sophistication, things that Bradley promised with his expensive suits and talk of opportunities in Seattle. "We can't keep doing this," she whispered, though her actions contradicted her words as she traced patterns on Bradley's chest. Bradley Henson, 42 and never married, laughed softly. "Why not? Your husband's too busy playing with his wood to notice anything." His tone dripped with contempt. "Besides, I told you, once my Seattle project goes through, we'll have enough money to start fresh. Just need to be patient a little longer." What neither of them knew was that Clint Webb was far from the simple craftsman they believed him to be. Before returning to Millfield to take over his father's struggling furniture business, Clint had spent 8 years in Army Special Forces. He'd learned to read people, to notice details others missed, and most importantly, to plan operations with surgical precision. That evening, as Clint and Tyler shared burgers at Murphy's Diner, Tyler mentioned something that made his father's blood run cold. "Oh, I forgot to tell you," Tyler said between bites. "Mrs. Patterson from the bank called while you were in the shop. Something about Mom taking out a loan? She seemed confused because she thought you'd signed it too." Clint kept his expression neutral, but his mind raced. Faye Patterson had been the family banker for years. If Alicia was taking out loans without his knowledge, probably just paperwork confusion, Clint said easily. "I'll call her tomorrow." But that night, while Alicia was at her mysterious book club meeting, Clint did something he'd never done in 15 years of marriage. He went through her things. Hidden in a shoe box in the back of her closet, he found loan documents for $50,000, credit card statements for stores he'd never heard of, and most damning of all, a receipt from the Millfield Motor Lodge dated just 3 days ago. Chapter 2, The Unraveling. Clint sat in his truck outside the Millfield Motor Lodge at 2:47 a.m., his hands steady on the steering wheel despite the storm building inside him. The receipt from Alicia's shoebox was tucked in his shirt pocket, burning against his chest like a brand. Room 237. That's what the receipt had said. He'd followed her tonight, watching as she met Bradley Henson in the parking lot, seeing them embrace like lovers who'd been apart for months rather than hours. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound he'd taken in Afghanistan. His phone buzzed. A text from Alicia, book club running late. "Don't wait up. Love you. Love." The word mocked him. Clint drove home in silence, his mind already shifting into operational mode. Emotion was a luxury he couldn't afford now. He needed intelligence, strategy, and most importantly, patience. The next morning, Clint made his first call to Mitchell Zimmerman, his old army buddy who now ran a private investigation firm in Billings. "Mitch, I need a favor," Clint said, standing in his workshop where no one could overhear. "Full background check on someone. Bradley Hinson, real estate developer here in Millfield. Personal or professional?" Mitch's voice was carefully neutral. "Both. And Mitch, this one's off the books." 3 days later, Mitch called back with information that made Clint's jaw clench. Bradley Hinson wasn't just a successful real estate developer. He was a predator who specialized in targeting married women in small towns. He'd done this before in 3 other cities, leaving a trail of broken marriages and financial ruin in his wake. But this time would be different. This time, he'd chosen the wrong man's wife. Clint began his own surveillance, using skills he'd hoped never to need again. He documented everything. The hotel meetings, the restaurants where they held hands like teenagers, the apartment Bradley was secretly renting as their love nest. It was during one of these surveillance operations that Clint discovered the true scope of their betrayal. He was positioned across from Bradley's apartment building when he saw them on the balcony, wine glasses in hand, laughing about something. Through his telephoto lens, he watched Bradley show Alicia something on his phone. Photos of their house, their property, Tyler's school. Clint's blood turned to ice as he read Bradley's lips. "Once we sell this place, we'll have enough for a fresh start in Seattle. The kid will adjust." They weren't just having an affair. They were planning to steal his life. That night, Clint made his second call to an old military contact, this one to Eric Berger, who now worked in what he euphemistically called private security consultation. "I need someone watched," Clint said simply, "and I need to know every dirty secret he's trying to hide." Eric's laugh was cold. "You know that's not cheap. Money's not an issue." What Clint didn't tell Eric was that he'd already begun liquidating assets, selling pieces from his personal collection of antique woodworking tools, calling in debts from customers who owed him money. He was building a war chest, and he'd need every penny for what was coming. The next piece of the puzzle fell into place when Tyler came home from school upset. Clint found him in his room, staring at his phone with tears in his eyes. "What's wrong, son?" Tyler looked up, his young face full of confusion and hurt. "Dad, why would Mom tell Mr. Hinson about my baseball cards? The really valuable ones you helped me organize?" Clint's vision went red for a moment before he forced himself to sit calmly on Tyler's bed. "What do you mean?" "I heard her on the phone with him. She was describing the Mickey Mantle rookie card, the one Grandpa left me. She said something about how much collectors would pay for it." The final piece clicked into place. They weren't just planning to run away together. They were planning to strip him of everything valuable, including Tyler's inheritance from his grandfather. That night, after Tyler was asleep and Alicia was at another late inventory session at her boutique, Clint made his third call. This one was to his lawyer, Andre Norton. "Andre, I need you to do something for me. Quietly. I want to transfer ownership of Webb Woodworks to a holding company. Tonight." "Clint, that's unusual." "Is everything. Just do it." "And Andre, if anyone comes asking about my assets in the next few weeks, you know nothing." As Clint hung up, he looked around the house he'd built with his own hands, at the life he'd carefully constructed for his family. They thought they could take it all, destroy everything he'd worked for, and walk away laughing. They were about to learn why Clint Webb had earned 3 Purple Hearts and a Silver Star in Afghanistan. Some men forgave. Some men forgot. Clint Webb was not one of those men. Chapter 3. The Setup. 2 weeks after discovering the betrayal, Clint Webb had transformed from a trusting husband into a master strategist. His workshop, once filled only with the tools of his trade, now contained a second workbench hidden behind a false panel. One that held surveillance equipment, printed photographs, and detailed dossiers on both Bradley Hinson and the network of accomplices Clint had discovered. Eric Berger's investigation had uncovered a gold mine of information. Bradley wasn't working alone. His Seattle business opportunity was actually a pyramid scheme targeting rural investors, and he had a partner, a woman named Geneva Curtis who specialized in identity theft and money laundering. More importantly, Eric had discovered that Bradley was already married to a woman in Portland who had no idea about his extracurricular activities. Clint smiled grimly as he studied the photographs of Bradley's actual wife, Marion Hinson. a nurse with 2 young children who believed her husband was traveling for legitimate business. This would be useful. His phone rang, interrupting his planning session. The caller ID showed Alan Barnes, owner of the local hardware store and one of Clint's oldest friends. "Clint, you need to know something." Alan's voice was tight with anger. "Alicia was in here yesterday, asking about the value of your tool collection. Specifically, she wanted to know how much that antique plane set your grandfather left you was worth." The plane set. 5 hand-forged woodworking planes from the 1800s, worth more than most people's cars. They've been passed down through 4 generations of webmen, and Clint had planned to give them to Tyler someday. "Thanks for the heads up, Alan." "Clint, is everything okay?" She seemed mighty interested in what you owned versus what was marital property. "Everything's fine," Clint lied smoothly. "Just some insurance questions." But everything was far from fine. The scope of their betrayal was expanding daily. They weren't just planning to leave. They were systematically cataloging everything of value in his life, planning to strip him bare before they disappeared. That evening, Clint put the next phase of his plan into motion. He called Alicia from his workshop, putting on his best concerned husband voice. "Honey, I got a weird call from the bank today. Faye Patterson said there might be some unusual activity on our accounts. Something about large transactions." The silence on the other end stretched just a beat too long. "Oh, that's probably just the loan paperwork I mentioned. For the boutique expansion, remember?" Another lie. There was no boutique expansion. Eric's investigation had revealed that Alicia had already given notice on her store lease, effective at the end of the month. "Right, of course," Clint said easily. "Maybe I should come down tomorrow and sign whatever needs signing. You know how banks are about documentation." "No." The word came out too sharp, too fast. "I mean, I already handled everything. You don't need to worry about it." After hanging up, Clint allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Panic was setting in on their end. Good. Panic people made mistakes. His satisfaction was short-lived when Tyler burst into the workshop, his face flushed with anger and confusion. "Dad, I need to tell you something, but you're going to be mad." Clint set down the piece he was working on and gave Tyler his full attention. "I won't be mad at you, son. What's going on?" I've been listening to Mom's phone calls. I know I shouldn't have, but something felt wrong." Tyler's words tumbled out in a rush. "She's been talking to Mr. Henson about us moving, about how you'd get over it eventually and how I'd adjust to a new life in Seattle." The workshop seemed to tilt around Clint. They were planning to take Tyler, his son, his only child, the one good thing that had come from his marriage to Alicia. "What else did you hear?" Clint's voice was deadly calm. She said you were too simple to ever figure it out. That you were just a small-town carpenter who thought with his heart instead of his head." Tyler's voice cracked. "Dad," she was laughing when she said it. "Simple. Small-town carpenter." Clint looked around his workshop, at the custom pieces that sold for thousands of dollars to clients across the country, at the business he'd built through intelligence, skill, and relentless determination, at the photos on his workbench showing the complex joinery techniques he'd mastered, the innovative designs that had earned him features in woodworking magazines. They thought he was simple. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. "Tyler," Clint said quietly, "I need you to do something for me." "Can you do that?" His son nodded, wiping his eyes. "I need you to keep listening to those phone calls, but I need you to record them on your phone when you can. Can you do that without getting caught?" Tyler straightened up, his jaw setting in a way that reminded Clint painfully of his own father. "Yeah, Dad, I can do that." "Good. And Tyler, what we're doing, this is between us. No one else needs to know. Not your friends, not your teachers, nobody. Can I trust you with that?" "You can trust me, Dad." As Tyler left the workshop, Clint pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact he'd hoped never to use again. Derek Francis had been his demolitions expert in Afghanistan, a man who could make anything disappear without a trace. But he wasn't going to make them disappear. That would be too easy. Instead, he was going to make them wish they'd never heard the name Clint Webb. The game was about to begin. Chapter 4. The Hunter Becomes the Hunted. Bradley Henson prided himself on being 3 steps ahead of everyone else. At 42, he'd perfected the art of seduction and manipulation, leaving a trail of broken marriages and empty bank accounts across the Pacific Northwest. Millfield was supposed to be his easiest score yet, a simple furniture maker's wife with access to property and assets, ripe for the taking. But as he sat in his rented apartment reviewing the photographs Alicia had taken of Clint's valuable possessions, something nagged at him. The man was too calm, too accepting of his wife's sudden business ventures and late nights. "You're paranoid," Alicia said, curled up beside him on the leather couch he'd bought with money from his last conquest. Clint's exactly what he appears to be, a small-town guy who thinks the best of everyone. He's not smart enough to be suspicious. Bradley wasn't so sure. Yesterday, he'd noticed a pickup truck that seemed to follow him from the coffee shop to his apartment. When he doubled back to check, it was gone. Today, he'd caught a glimpse of someone with a camera across from the hotel where he'd been meeting Geneva Curtis. Probably nothing, but in his line of work, probably nothing could get you arrested. His phone buzzed with a text from Geneva. "We need to move up the timeline. Something feels wrong." Bradley frowned. Geneva Curtis was many things: a master manipulator, an expert forger, a woman who could disappear into thin air when needed, but she wasn't prone to paranoia without cause. He called her immediately. "What spooked you?" "Someone's been asking questions about our Seattle operation. Careful questions, professional questions. The kind that suggest law enforcement or private investigation." Bradley's blood ran cold. "How is that possible? We've been careful." "I don't know, but we need to accelerate everything." "How soon can you get Webb's assets liquidated?" Bradley looked at Alicia, who was painting her nails and humming softly, completely oblivious to the conversation. "Give me 2 weeks. 3 at most." "You don't have 3 weeks. You have 1. The line went dead, leaving Bradley staring at his phone. 1 week to convince Alicia to drain her husband's accounts, steal his valuables, and disappear with him to a non-extradition country. It was ambitious, even for him. What Bradley didn't know was that Clint Webb was sitting in a rented office space across town, listening to every word through the sophisticated surveillance equipment Mitchell Zimmerman had installed in Bradley's apartment 3 days earlier. Clint smiled as he made notes in a leather-bound journal. 1 week. Perfect. That gave him exactly the timeline he needed to execute the final phase of his plan. His phone rang, and Tyler's voice came through, excited and nervous. "Dad, I got another recording. Mom's meeting Mr. Henson tonight at that apartment. She thinks I'm staying at Jake's house, but I can come home early and—" "No," Clint said firmly. "You stay at Jake's exactly as planned. I need you away from the house tonight." "But Dad—" "Tyler, listen to me. What's happening tonight is going to be intense. I need to know you're safe. Can you trust me on this?" Tyler was quiet for a moment. "Yeah, Dad. I trust you." After hanging up, Clint gathered his equipment and headed out into the Montana night. It was time to let Bradley and Alicia know they were being hunted. Bradley's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse downtown. Clint had been monitoring the building for weeks, learning the patterns of every resident, mapping every entrance and exit. He knew that Bradley always parked in the same spot, always took the stairs instead of the elevator, always checked his mail at exactly 11 p.m. Tonight, he was going to break that pattern. At 10:45 p.m., as Bradley and Alicia lay in bed discussing their accelerated timeline, every light in the apartment building went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting eerie shadows in the hallways. "Probably just a transformer," Bradley muttered, but Clint could hear the tension in his voice through the surveillance feed. 5 minutes later, all the lights came back on. 10 minutes after that, Bradley's car alarm started blaring in the parking lot. When Bradley went down to investigate, he found his BMW completely undamaged, but sitting in a different parking space than where he'd left it. The car alarm shut off the moment he approached, and a folded piece of paper was tucked under his windshield wiper. With shaking hands, Bradley unfolded the note. Written in block letters were 4 simple words: "I know what you're doing." He spun around, scanning the parking lot, the street, the windows of nearby buildings. Nothing. No one. Just shadows and the distant sound of traffic. Back in the apartment, Alicia was pacing frantically. What if it's Clint? What if he knows? "It's not Clint," Bradley said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Clint Webb doesn't have the balls or the brains for something like this." But even as he said it, Bradley was remembering details that hadn't seemed important before. The way Clint's handshake was too firm, too confident for a simple furniture maker. The scars on his forearms that looked like they might have come from something more dangerous than woodworking tools. The way the man's eyes seemed to catalog everything, everyone, like he was conducting a tactical assessment. "We're moving up the timeline," Bradley announced. "Tomorrow night, you're going to tell Clint you need emergency access to your joint accounts. Some kind of crisis with the boutique. We clean out everything we can and disappear by Friday." Alicia nodded, but her confidence was shaken. "What about Tyler? What about him? I can't just abandon my son." Bradley's expression hardened. "You can and you will. Unless you want to explain to him why mommy's going to prison for fraud and theft." As they argued, neither of them noticed the small device Clint had attached to the underside of Bradley's BMW, a device that would track their every movement and transmit their location to his phone in real time. The hunter had become the hunted, but they didn't know it yet. That was about to change. Chapter 5, The Trap Springs. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, with storm clouds gathering over Millfield like an omen. Clint Webb stood in his workshop, methodically sharpening his chisels while reviewing the final details of his plan. Every piece was in place, every contingency accounted for. His phone buzzed with a message from Eric Berger, package delivered. Bradley's wife in Portland knows everything. She's filing for divorce and pressing charges for bigamy. Local PD will have a warrant by end of business today. Clint smiled grimly. Phase 1 was complete. At noon, his phone rang. Alicia's voice was strained, artificial. "Clint, honey, I need to talk to you about something urgent. Can you come to the boutique?" "What's wrong?" "There's been a situation with the insurance. I need you to sign some papers so we can access our emergency funds." Clint glanced at the clock on his workshop wall. "Right on schedule. I'll be there in 20 minutes. But instead of driving to the boutique, Clint went to the bank. He found Faye Patterson in her office, exactly as he'd arranged. "Clint, thank goodness you're here," Faye said, her voice tight with concern. "I've been trying to reach you all morning. There's been unusual activity on your accounts. Someone tried to initiate a wire transfer for your entire savings balance." "Let me guess," Clint said calmly. "My wife." Faye's expression confirmed his suspicion. "I stopped it, of course. Bank policy requires both signatures for transfers over $10,000. "But Clint," she was angry when I told her no. Really angry. "Thank you, Faye. You may have saved my family's entire future." What Clint didn't tell Faye was that he'd moved most of his liquid assets into accounts Bradley and Alicia knew nothing about. The money they were trying to steal had been carefully calculated bait. Enough to seem real, not enough to actually hurt him. His phone rang again. This time it was Tyler calling from school. "Dad, I heard Mom on the phone with Mr. Henson. She was crying. She said something about the bank not cooperating and how they needed to move to Plan B tonight." "Plan B?" "Something about the house. And your tools." "Dad, I think they're going to try to steal everything." Clint's jaw tightened. Let them come. He was ready. That evening, Clint sat in his living room, apparently absorbed in reading a woodworking magazine. In reality, he was monitoring the surveillance feed from cameras he'd installed throughout the house, tracking the GPS signal from Bradley's car as it approached, and listening to the real-time audio from the device he'd planted in Alicia's purse. "Are you sure about this?" Alicia's voice came through his earpiece, tinny but clear. "It's the only way," Bradley replied. "We take what we can carry, the antique tools, the cash he keeps in his workshop safe, Tyler's baseball cards, and we're gone. By the time he figures out what happened, we'll be in Seattle. What if he tries to stop us?" Bradley's laugh was cold and cruel. "What's he going to do? He's a furniture maker, not a soldier. We'll be in and out before he knows what hit him." Clint almost smiled at that. If they only knew. At 11:47 p.m., Clint heard the soft click of his front door opening. Alicia's key, of course. She crept through the house she'd shared with him for 15 years like a thief in the night, which, he supposed, was exactly what she'd become. Bradley followed behind her, carrying empty duffel bags and a crowbar. They moved with the confidence of people who believed they held all the cards. They went to his workshop first, as Clint had predicted. Through the security cameras, he watched them systematically loot everything of value. His grandfather's antique planes, the custom tools that had taken him years to collect, Even the cash from his workshop's safe. Money he deliberately left there as bait. But they saved the best for last. The real prize they'd come for was upstairs in Tyler's room. Clint's blood began to simmer as he watched them enter his son's bedroom. Saw Bradley rifle through Tyler's possessions like they were items at a garage sale. When Bradley picked up the Mickey Mantle rookie card, Tyler's most prized possession, a gift from his grandfather, Clint's vision went red. But he forced himself to wait. Patience. Timing. Everything depended on executing his plan perfectly. They were heading back toward the kitchen, arms full of stolen goods, when Clint made his move. He stepped out of the shadows, a baseball bat in his hands. Going somewhere, Alicia dropped the bag she was carrying, antique tools spilling across the hardwood floor with metallic clangs. Bradley spun around, the crowbar still in his grip. "Clint, you're supposed to be asleep. Supposed to be a lot of things," Clint said quietly. "Supposed to be able to trust my wife. Supposed to believe that the mother of my child wouldn't try to steal his inheritance." Bradley stepped forward, raising the crowbar. "Look, we can work this out. The way you work things out with your wife, Marion, in Portland." Bradley's face went white. "How do you know about her? About Geneva Curtis? About your little pyramid scheme in Seattle?" Clint's smile was razor sharp. "I know everything, Bradley. Question is, what are you going to do about it?" That's when Bradley made his fatal mistake. He charged. Clint had been hoping he would. Chapter 6, Blood and Truth. The crowbar whistled through the air where Clint's head had been a split second before. But Clint Webb wasn't there anymore. 8 years of Special Forces training had taught him that survival wasn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It was about being the smartest and the most prepared. Bradley swung again, this time in a wild arc that left him off balance. Clint stepped inside the swing, bringing the baseball bat up in a controlled strike that connected with Bradley's wrist. The sound of breaking bone echoed through the kitchen as the crowbar clattered to the floor. "Jesus Christ!" Bradley screamed, clutching his shattered wrist. "You broke my fucking arm." "That's just the beginning," Clint said coldly. Alicia was backing toward the kitchen door, her face pale with terror. "Clint, please, we can explain." "Explain?" Clint's voice was deadly quiet. "Explain how you were going to steal my son's inheritance? Explain how you've been planning to take Tyler away from everything he's ever known? Go ahead, Alicia. I'm listening." "We were going to send for him once we got settled." "Liar." Clint stepped closer, the bat still in his hands. "I heard the recordings, Alicia. Every conversation, every plan. You were going to disappear and leave Tyler with nothing but a note saying Mommy found someone better." Bradley was trying to edge toward the back door, cradling his broken wrist. "Look, man, this got out of hand. We can make a deal." "The only deal you're getting is this," Clint said. "You have 30 seconds to get out of my house before I decide you're an intruder and act accordingly. You can't threaten us." Alicia's voice was shrill with panic. "I'll call the police. I'll tell them you attacked us." Clint pulled out his phone and hit play on an audio file. Alicia's voice filled the kitchen, crystal clear. "The stupid bastard doesn't suspect a thing. Once we clean out his accounts and grab the valuables, we'll be gone. Tyler will get over it eventually. Kids are resilient." Alicia's face went white as she realized the implications. You recorded us?" "I recorded everything. Your affair, your theft plans, your conversations about abandoning Tyler. All of it time-stamped. All of it admissible in court." Clint's smile was savage. "Tell me, Alicia, how do you think a family court judge will react to hearing his mother?" Bradley was backing toward the door, his good hand pressed against his broken wrist. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Clint's voice was final. "Because in about 10 minutes, the Millfield police are going to arrest you for bigamy, fraud, and grand theft. Your wife, Marion, in Portland, was very helpful when my investigator contacted her. Turns out she's been wondering where all your business trip money was going." The blood drained from Bradley's face. "How did you find her?" "Same way I found Geneva Curtis. Same way I found out about your pyramid scheme. Same way I know about the warrant that was issued for your arrest 6 hours ago." As if on cue, red and blue lights began flashing outside the kitchen window. Car doors slammed, and heavy footsteps approached the house. "You called the cops on us." Alicia's voice was disbelieving. I called them on him, Clint corrected. You're just collateral damage. The front door opened, and Officer Patrick Hunt's voice echoed through the house. Millfield Police. Mr. Webb. In the kitchen, Patrick. Clint called back. Patrick Hunt had been 2 years behind Clint in high school, and he'd heard enough rumors about what Clint had done in the Army to treat him with considerable respect. When he entered the kitchen and saw Bradley clutching a broken wrist, Alicia cowering by the door, and Clint calmly holding a baseball bat, his hand moved instinctively to his service weapon. What's the situation here, Clint? Found these two burglarizing my house, Clint said simply. That bag there contains my stolen property. This one, he gestured to Bradley, assaulted me with a crowbar. I defended myself. Patrick looked at the bag of antique tools, then at the crowbar on the floor, then at Bradley's obviously broken wrist. Mr. Henson, I believe you're wanted on some outstanding warrants. Bradley's face crumpled. This is a setup. You planned this whole thing. Planned what? Patrick asked reasonably. Getting you to break into his house and steal his property? Because that's what I'm seeing here. He knew we were coming. He was waiting for us. So you're admitting you broke into Mr. Webb's house with intent to commit theft? Bradley realized his mistake too late. In his panic and pain, he just confessed to multiple felonies. As Patrick cuffed Bradley and read him his rights, Alicia made one last desperate play. Clint, please. Think about Tyler. Think about our family. We can work this out. Clint looked at his wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, with something approaching pity. I'm thinking about Tyler. That's why you're never going to see him again. The words hit Alicia like a physical blow. You can't keep my son from me. Watch me. Clint pulled out a thick manila envelope. Divorce papers, complete with evidence of adultery, theft, and child abandonment conspiracy. Your boyfriend wasn't the only one recording conversations, Alicia. Tyler's been documenting every phone call where you discussed abandoning him. Alicia's legs gave out, and she sank to the kitchen floor. For the first time since this nightmare began, she seemed to understand the magnitude of what she'd lost. But Clint Webb wasn't done with her yet. Not even close. Chapter 7. The Midnight Reckoning. 3 weeks after Bradley Henson's arrest, Alicia Webb was learning that her husband's revenge was far more sophisticated than a simple criminal case. She'd been evicted from a luxury apartment she'd been keeping secret, her credit cards had been canceled for suspicious activity, and her boutique had been shut down by the health department for safety violations that seemed to appear overnight. But the final humiliation came on a cold Friday night when she received a text message from an unknown number. Roof of the old grain elevator. Midnight. Come alone if you want to see Tyler again. Alicia's blood turned to ice. She'd been staying in a dingy motel on the edge of town, surviving on takeout in desperation when a message arrived. She hadn't seen Tyler since the night of Bradley's arrest. Clint had somehow managed to get an emergency restraining order that kept her away from her own son. The old grain elevator had been abandoned for decades, a rusting monument to Millfield's agricultural past. As Alicia climbed the narrow metal stairs to the roof, her heart hammered against her ribs. The wind whipped her hair around her face, and the lights of the town spread out below her like scattered diamonds. Clint was waiting for her, silhouetted against the night sky. But something was wrong with the picture. His left arm was in a crude sling, and his face was bloodied and bruised. What happened to you? She gasped. Your boyfriend's friends happened to me, Clint said coldly. Turns out Geneva Curtis didn't appreciate me destroying her Seattle operation. She sent some very unpleasant men to discuss the matter. Alicia looked around the rooftop frantically. Where's Tyler? You said. Tyler's safe. He's with Alan Barnes and his family. He doesn't know about this. About what? Clint, what's going on? Clint stepped closer, and Alicia could see the rage burning in his eyes. What's going on is justice. You thought you could destroy my life, steal from my son, and walk away laughing. You were wrong. I never meant. You never meant to get caught. Clint's voice was like ice. But you did, and now you're going to pay the price. That's when Alicia noticed the rope. It was anchored to a steel beam, and it hung over the edge of the roof like a noose waiting for a neck. Clint, no. You're not a killer. You're not. I'm whatever I need to be to protect my son. Clint grabbed her arm with his good hand, his grip like steel. You want to know what Geneva's men told me before I dealt with them? They told me about your real plan. How you were going to frame me for embezzlement, have me arrested, and take everything while I rotted in prison. Alicia's face went white. That's not true. Don't lie to me. Clint's roar echoed across the rooftop. I found the forged documents in your motel room. Bank statements with my signature, investment records I never signed, a whole financial trail designed to make me look like a criminal. The wind gusted, and Alicia stumbled backward toward the edge of the roof. Clint, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you were going to destroy me. How you were going to take Tyler and disappear while I spent the next 20 years in federal prison. Clint's good hand was shaking with rage. Do you have any idea what they do to men who steal from their own families in prison, Alicia? She was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. I was scared. Bradley said it was the only way. Bradley's in a federal holding cell waiting for trial. He's not going to save you. No one is. That's when Tyler's voice cut through the night air. Dad, don't. Clint spun around to see his son climbing through the rooftop access door, his young face pale with terror. Tyler, what are you doing here? I told you to stay with the Barnes family. I followed you, Tyler said, stepping carefully across the roof. I heard you on the phone. I knew you were planning something. Alicia seized the moment. Tyler, help me. Your father's lost his mind. Shut up, Tyler said quietly. The words were so unexpected, so cold, that both adults stared at him. Tyler. Alicia's voice was, I said shut up. Tyler's voice was stronger now, carrying an edge that reminded Alicia painfully of his father. I heard everything, Mom. Every phone call, every plan. I know what you were going to do to Dad. I know what you were going to do to me. Baby, I was going to send for you. You called me baggage. Tyler's voice cracked with emotion. I recorded it all just like Dad taught me. You said I was dead weight, that you needed to dump before starting fresh. Alicia felt the world tilting around her. Her own son, her own flesh and blood, looking at her like she was a stranger. Tyler, please. I don't want to see you anymore, Tyler said simply. I don't want you to be my mom anymore. The words hit Alicia like physical blows. She staggered backward, her heel catching on a loose piece of roofing material. Tyler, no. She fell. For a split second, she hung in the air, arms windmilling desperately. Then her fingers caught the rope Clint had anchored to the beam. But her grip was weak, panicked. She was slipping. Pull me up, she screamed. Please, pull me up. Clint looked down at his wife, the woman who had planned to destroy him, steal from his son, and disappear without a trace. His broken arm made it impossible to haul her up alone, even if he wanted to. But Tyler was already moving. The boy grabbed the rope with both hands, trying to pull his mother to safety. Tyler, stop, Clint said quietly. I have to help her. Tyler gasped, straining against the rope. She's still my mom. Clint looked at his son, 13 years old and already showing more honor than the woman dangling from the rope, and made his choice. He grabbed the rope with his good hand, but instead of pulling Alicia up, he looked down at her with cold, empty eyes. You should have kept your mouth shut, he said. Then he whispered something in Tyler's ear. Chapter 8. What the Son Whispered. Tyler Webb looked down at his mother, dangling from a rope, her fingers slipping with each gust of wind, her face twisted with terror and desperation. For a moment, he was just a 13-year-old boy watching his mother face death. Then he remembered her voice on the phone, laughing as she called him baggage. He remembered her describing him as dead weight to the man she was planning to run away with. He remembered every cruel word, every dismissive comment, every moment when she'd made it clear that her own convenience mattered more than his existence. Clint leaned close to his son's ear, his voice barely audible over the wind. It's your choice, Tyler. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. But remember, she made her choice first. Tyler stared down at Alicia, whose grip was weakening by the second. His young face was a mask of concentration, processing emotions and decisions that no child should ever have to face. Mom, he called down to her. Tyler, please, baby, help me. Do you love me? The question hung in the air like a blade. Alicia's eyes went wide with confusion and desperation. What? Of course I love you. You my son, more than Mr. Henson? Tyler, please, just pull me up and we can talk. Answer the question, Mom. Do you love me more than Bradley Henson? Alicia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. In her panic, in her desperation to say whatever would save her life, she couldn't find the words. And in that silence, Tyler found his answer. He leaned over the edge, his young voice carrying clearly in the night air. I heard what you said about Dad, too. You called him stupid. You said he was too simple to ever figure out what you were doing. Tyler, I didn't mean. You were wrong about him, Tyler continued, his voice growing stronger. And you were wrong about me. He looked at the rope in his hands, then at his father, who nodded once. Dad's not simple, Mom. He's the smartest man I know. Smart enough to figure out everything you were planning. Smart enough to protect us both from you. Alicia's face contorted with understanding and horror. Tyler, no. And I'm not dead weight, Tyler said quietly. I'm his son, his real son, the son who chooses to stay with the parent who actually loves him. The boy looked down at his mother one last time, memorizing her face, knowing this would be the last time he'd ever see her alive. Then he whispered the words that would haunt Alicia's final moments. Goodbye, Mom. I hope it was worth it. Tyler Webb let go of the rope. Alicia's scream echoed across the rooftop, across the sleeping town below, across the mountains that surrounded Millfield like ancient guardians. It was a sound of loss, of regret, of the terrible understanding that her own choices had led her to this moment. The scream cut off abruptly. Tyler stood at the edge of the roof, looking down at the still form below. His face was pale but resolute. When he turned to his father, his eyes were dry. Is she dead? Clint moved to the edge and looked down. Alicia's body lay motionless in the gravel parking lot, her neck bent at an impossible angle. Yes, he said simply. Tyler nodded. Good. Father and son stood together on the rooftop, the wind whipping around them. The lights of Millfield spread out below like a constellation of possibilities. What happens now? Tyler asked. Now we go home, Clint said, and we move on with our lives. What about the police? Clint smiled grimly. Your mother came here to meet someone, probably another man she was planning to run away with. She must have gotten too close to the edge in the dark. Tragic accident. Tyler looked at his father with something approaching awe. You really did think of everything, didn't you? I had to. I had something worth protecting. They climbed down from the roof together, leaving Alicia's body for someone else to find. As they drove home through the quiet streets of Millfield, Tyler broke the silence. Dad, do you think I'm a bad person for letting her fall? Clint considered the question carefully. I think you're a person who learned that actions have consequences. Your mother made her choices, and those choices led her here. You didn't kill her, Tyler. She killed herself the moment she decided to betray our family. I don't feel bad about it, Tyler said quietly. Is that wrong? No, Clint said. It's honest. And honesty is something our family is going to value from now on. They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence, two survivors of a war that had claimed only one casualty, the person who had declared it in the first place. Behind them, the grain elevator stood silent against the night sky, keeping its secrets like a stone sentinel. By morning, the police would find Alicia's body. There would be an investigation, questions, a coroner's report that concluded accidental death. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, Clint and Tyler Webb were going home. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 6 months after Alicia's death, life in Millfield had settled into a new rhythm for the Webb family. The official investigation had concluded exactly as Clint had predicted, a tragic accident involving a distraught woman who had been facing criminal charges in connection with her boyfriend's fraud scheme. Bradley Henson had been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for his multi-state fraud operation. Geneva Curtis had disappeared entirely, presumably having learned from Bradley's fate that Clint Webb was not a man to be trifled with. The Seattle Pyramid scheme had collapsed, saving dozens of potential victims from financial ruin. But the real measure of Clint's victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the workshop behind his house, where Tyler spent every afternoon learning the craft that had been passed down through 4 generations of Webb men. Dad, is this joint tight enough? Tyler asked, holding up a piece of cherry what he'd been working on for weeks. Clint examined his son's work with the critical eye of a master craftsman. The dovetail joint was clean, precise, and perfectly fitted. That's museum-quality work, son. Your great-grandfather would be proud. Tyler beamed with pride. At 14 now, he'd grown 3 inches and gained 20 pounds of muscle from the physical work in the shop. But more importantly, he'd gained something else, a sense of purpose, of belonging to something larger than himself. The business had flourished in the months since Alicia's death. Word of Clint's craftsmanship had spread beyond Montana, bringing clients from across the country who wanted custom furniture made by the man whose story had become something of a legend in woodworking circles. The official story was that he'd overcome a tragic loss to build something beautiful with his son. The truth was darker, but no less powerful. "Mr. Webb," a woman's voice called from the workshop entrance. Clint looked up to see Ruby Baxter, the new librarian who'd moved to Millfield from Denver 3 months earlier. She was in her early 30s, with auburn hair and intelligent green eyes, and she'd been finding excuses to visit the workshop with increasing frequency. "Ruby," Clint said, wiping his hands on a shop rag, "what brings you by today?" "I was wondering if you'd reconsider my offer," she said, her cheeks flushing slightly. "About having dinner this weekend. Tyler's invited too, of course." Tyler looked up from his workbench with a knowing grin. "I think Dad would like that, Miss Baxter. He needs to get out more." "Tyler," Clint warned, but his tone was amused rather than angry. "It's true," Tyler continued, enjoying his father's discomfort. "All he does is work and worry about me. He could use some adult conversation that doesn't involve wood grain and joint techniques." Ruby laughed, a warm sound that filled the workshop. "So that's a yes?" Clint found himself smiling, really smiling, for the first time in longer than he could remember. "That's a yes." After Ruby left, Tyler set down his tools and looked at his father seriously. "She's nice, Dad, and she makes you laugh. It's not that simple, son. After everything that happened, Mom made her choice," Tyler said firmly. "That doesn't mean you have to spend the rest of your life paying for it." The wisdom in his son's words struck Clint like a physical blow. When had Tyler become so mature, so perceptive? When had he started sounding like the man he was destined to become, rather than the boy he'd been? "You're right," Clint said. "But if we're going to move forward, we need to understand something. What happened that night on the roof stays between us," Tyler finished. "I know, Dad. Some secrets are meant to be kept, and you're okay with that." Tyler was quiet for a moment, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. "She was going to destroy you. She was going to abandon me. She chose Bradley Henson over her own family." He looked up at his father with eyes that held too much knowledge for someone his age. "I'm not sorry she's dead, Dad. I'm sorry she made choices that led to her being dead. There's a difference." Clint studied his son's face, looking for signs of trauma, guilt, or regret. He found none. What he found instead was a young man who understood justice in a way that most adults never would. "I love you, Tyler. I love you too, Dad." That evening, as father and son worked side by side in the fading light, a sense of peace settled over the workshop. The storm that had threatened to destroy their family had passed, leaving them stronger and more united than ever. Outside, the Montana sky painted itself in shades of gold and crimson, and the mountains stood eternal watch over the small town of Millfield. Somewhere in those mountains, the bones of small animals returned to the earth, becoming part of the cycle that had continued for millennia. In the town cemetery, Alicia Webb's headstone bore a simple inscription, "Beloved Mother and Wife." It was a lie, but it was the kind of lie that small towns told to preserve their sense of order and decency. The truth was buried with her, and it would stay buried. But in the workshop behind the house on Elm Street, the truth lived on in the bond between a father and son who had faced the darkness together and emerged victorious. They'd learned that family wasn't just about blood. It was about choice, loyalty, and the willingness to protect what mattered most. As Clint watched Tyler carefully sand a piece of walnut, preparing it for the finish that would bring out its natural beauty, he thought about legacy. Not the kind measured in money or property, but the kind passed down through generations of craftsmen who understood that creating something beautiful required destroying everything that wasn't. Tyler looked up from his work, catching his father's contemplative mood. "What are you thinking about?" "The future," Clint said, "and how sometimes you have to burn down what's broken before you can build something new." Tyler nodded, understanding more than his father realized. Like starting over? Like starting over, Clint agreed. Outside, the sun set over Millfield, painting the sky in shades of justice and redemption. And in the web workshop, two men continued the ancient work of shaping wood and time into something that would last long after they were gone. The betrayal was over. The rebuilding had begun. And in the end, that was enough. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.